There are multiple types of support and resistance. So when anybody uses the term support, think about buyers. Think about what buyers do in order to keep a market from moving lower. That is the support that's created by this action of buying. Think of resistance as sellers and the selling pressure that traders and investors will bring when they believe something is too expensive or overbought, or simply a level at which they expect prices to stall and or fall. So it's the action behind these price levels that create something we would call support or something we would call resistance. Now, multiple types of support and resistance is really what traders around the world are actually looking at, whether you are looking at moving averages, whether you're looking at chart patterns. Anytime you have a level at which you expect there to be some sort of reaction, I call them decision levels, you are looking at what could potentially be support or resistance. Fibonacci is one way of discovering support and resistance based upon a recent decline or rally. Pivots are another type of support or resistance based upon the high, low, and close of the previous session. So again, how we come about discovering these levels has a number of different methodologies and indicators or formulas, but in the end, what we're really looking at is a reaction. Think about it for a moment. If we do decide that we're going to draw a line on our chart, whether that be some sort of uptrend line, which is support, or downtrend line, which is resistance, or a horizontal level, we could call a ceiling or resistance, or a support or floor level, we expect there to be that reaction. Otherwise, we wouldn't draw it on our charts to begin with. The reaction could be one of three things. Acceleration, in other words, prices reach a ceiling and are able to move through the ceiling and accelerate higher, or, for example, they might move to a floor, break the floor, and accelerate down lower. We could stall at that level, or we could reverse at that level. There's really only one of those three things, or a combination, that could happen at any one of these decision levels. So remember, not all support and resistance levels are decision levels. In other words, they won't all be reacted to. So we are projecting in many ways where we expect a reaction to occur. Other types of support and resistance could be the psychological levels. In other words, those numbers that end in a 00 or a 50. Those would be considered major psychological levels. We could also consider minor psychological levels, which would be levels that end in 20 or 80. The 200-period simple moving average, the 20-period simple moving average, these are dynamic support or resistance levels, as would be trend lines. In a dynamic support and resistance level, we're talking about the value of where the selling pressure or buying support could come in would be changing slightly. For example, in the situation of a trend line, as that trend line moves closer to current prices, the value of that trend line is changing. A moving average, again, a dynamic level, the value is changing, as opposed to static levels like a psychological level, or horizontal support resistance, or a Fibonacci, or a pivot, where it's a horizontal level that remains static until a new level is calculated. So again, also ask yourself, is it a dynamic or static support and resistance? And again, it's always about identifying where we expect prices to react. The likelihood of reaction could increase if we find a support or resistance level that has multiple reasons for being acknowledged. Maybe there's a moving average and a psychological level, or a psychological level and a Fibonacci, or maybe a moving average and a pivot coming in at that same level. That means different types of market participants, different types of analysis would pinpoint that price as being potentially a decision level, as potentially having support or resistance. So consider all that when you're looking at your charts, when you're looking for these support and resistance levels. It's all about the reaction.